we use questions to evaluate. If thoughts are questions and answers, questions to evaluate, and we said evaluate is how you decide what we value most. 20% of the 20% of the 20% of the 20% will get you. First of all, there are three brains in your head brain. That's what we are going to focus on now, right? So in the head brain, people say there are 60,000 thoughts. There are 60,000 thoughts a day, right? So, and of the 60,000 thoughts that we have every day, 50 to 60,000 thoughts that we have every day, if I were to say that this 60,000 thoughts are questions and answers, what would you say? What if this thoughts are questions and answers? So my question is to you is, who agrees with me? Who agrees with me? It's a question. Who's doubtful about this? That's a question too. Who disagrees with me? That is a question too. So in other words, what we are saying is we use questions to evaluate. Is that a fair statement to say? We use questions to evaluate. If thoughts are questions and answers, and we use questions to evaluate, and we said evaluate is how you decide what we value most, we're getting to something there. Out of the 300,000 questions, we use Pareto's principle. Pareto's principle basically is 20% of the actions will give you 80% results. And then if you fast forward that to 20% of the 20% of the 20%, which we share in many of my trainings too, 1% of actions will give you 50% of results. If that is true, from the 30,000 questions, you might be asking three questions do most of the work in your brain in evaluation, because that's a Pareto's 20% of the 20% of the 20% of the 20% will get you to three questions that you're asking. That is evaluating for you where you need to be focusing on, because where you're focusing on is where you're going, and where you're going, it's decided by what questions you're asking. That's how you're evaluating, and that's how we are moving to the next level. Let me try to give you an example. Google, right? When you search on Google, for Google, you're asking a question. Yes? For Google, you're asking a question. It's a query. They say it's a query. So when you search for, I want to have a six-pack, how do I get a six-pack? When I search on Google, how do I get a six-pack? Do you think Google is going to give me what are the best places to buy meat? Do you think Google will do that? If Google does that, one day their business is gone. Make sense? So if you're asking a question is, again, questions are evaluations. We use questions to evaluate. So when you ask a question, that question is going into Google, and Google is searching answers for that. And because of the answers that Google is bringing in, what happens is you are focusing on an outcome. So questions force you to focus on an outcome. Fair enough? So that eliminates the possibility of another outcome. Okay, so two things questions do. One is it will help you focus on something. It will help you not focus on something else. Are basically helping you focus on something and not focus on something else. And if you keep on asking this question, you're like, oh my gosh, what is the best place to best Greek restaurant to eat food every day? If you're like, oh my gosh, I'm looking for the best Greek restaurant to eat food every day. And if I keep on asking that question, what happens? For Google, if you ask that question, by the time you start typing, what happens? You're like, what is the best restaurant? Google will autofill it for you. Yes, that's how Google works. So is your brain. So just like Google, before you even start the question will habituate and autofill. Does that make sense? Habituate and autofill. For example, my question is, why am I failing all the time? Why my relationship never work? And if I keep on asking that question, what happens? One, it will focus on what? On failure. Why am I failing all the time? Naturally, where does the question focus on? It focuses on failure. and it eliminates the possibility of succeeding. Then the final step is, which is I will show you in the slides, and we are going to get into the first part of our worksheet, question breed exponentially. What it means is, if you have a question that you consistently ask, that questions will breed. It's like babies, tiny babies breeding. The questions will breed on itself. So one question will become 3, it becomes 5, and then those questions will take you to a completely different level in life or completely down. So basically Gandhi, it's a question. He asked a question: how could I peacefully defeat the most powerful country in the world? That's a question. And Socrates, I don't know how he looked like that exactly. Looks like a white person, but he was a Middle Eastern person. But we Americans and people, we changed his color to white. I'm kidding, but you got the idea. Socrates basically built his entire teaching methodology based on questions. Einstein basically asked questions. He asked a question: if a light is traveling, if one train is traveling at the speed of light in one, and another train is traveling at the speed of light another way, will the person sitting on that train will see the other person? Was a question. And this guy, Newton, basically asked a question: why is the apple falling down, not up? Until then, nobody else asked a question. He asked a question. He came up with this question. He created a question. So genius is nothing but, whether it is business genius or life genius, it's nothing but the ability to ask a new question. Is ability to ask a new question. And when you are able to ask a new question, then what happens is you could replace these 3 questions you have with those questions, then your life is transformed already. One more deeper level answer is, genius is nothing but the ability to consistently ask a relevant compound question. So what does that mean? If I'm really good at getting angry, I'm like, why am I getting angry all the time? That's one question. Okay. And whenever I get angry, I get violent too, let's say, for example. So I'm like, okay, why am I getting angry and violent at the same time? 2 questions. And whenever I get angry and violent, I eat a lot of food too. And why am I getting angry, violent, and eating a lot of food? It's a complex question. That is a negative example of a complex question. Look back at Einstein's example. He said, what if a train is going in one direction? 1 question. Another train is going in another direction. 2 questions. And there is a person who's sitting in one train. 3rd question. Another person sitting in another train. Will they see each other? 4 questions, 5 questions. When you are able to combine 5 questions in any space, you become a genius. So that's how, that's my understanding about genius. That's my definition of genius. And you could be that. Somebody convinced you that you are not. But the reality is, when you are able to combine questions and collect them together, you could be the best person, the best leader in your space, and you could be the best in your industry.